waters?
No.
I want a donut?
What kinds you got?
Just plain.
No. They were chocolate covered, I would say yes.
I started to, and I was like, nah, I'm just kidding.
You want a bottle of water?
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Evie.
I'm Brittany.
Nice to meet you. This is Poppy.
Poppy loves Jesus.
Yeah.
Would you like a bottle of water?
No, I got drinks in the
Okay.
truck and I'll just have to go to the bathroom, so
Okay.
thanks, but no thanks.
Go back upstairs for a little bit.
Okay. So Brittany, on Thursday nights, I have a single mom class up here that will be starting. And it's pretty much mandatory at the home. But it's going to be awesome.
Okay.
So, and we just have it right up here. So I'm super excited about that. Oh my goodness.
Where's your bathroom?
Right behind you.
Okay, stay over there.
This is for you.
So we're very glad to have you.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll get to know you a lot better. Poppy, get over here. Come here, Poppy. Can't be without me very long, can you?
You want to over? Or you can wait. Wait till you get home. Yes, we're so glad you're here. Oh, the dog.
Kira wants to love Jesus too.
Yeah. In her loud, crazy way. Ugh. Poppy, Poppy. Why are you cowering from me? It's okay. It's okay. I think we're gonna go to
Would, but they don't allow little furry females in there. And she would be whiny the whole time.
Yeah, I think we leave her here, but
She might be on your food.
I'm okay about that. Her pee is like, probably
Yeah, but it still smells.
nothing compared to Kira's. Is he snoring, Brittany?
What's the baby's
Did you
name?
see him? He's precious. Anthony.
You're hot and I'm cold.
I need to sit over there. The air's
I have
blowing.
my sweater in the truck though this
It's cooler over here. That's my favorite thing. We'll have to get a picture of him this week. It might be too big for him, honestly. We'll see.
So where's Susan this morning?
I don't know. She's probably gonna be watching on Facebook, I bet. But she's had a cold this week. It probably wasn't best for me to pick up the baby.
Mhm.
And it is just a cold. She went to the hospital and they totally gave her the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Yes, you're welcome. But it's probably what she decided, I would imagine. Did you make it to the bathroom?
Oh, ma'am.
Okay, it's right there. More stairs right behind you.
This right here?
Yes. And then there's donuts and snacks over there if you would like something.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. You're okay. So you had a good week, you said?
Yeah. Probation. Yeah. I haven't got my letter yet, but I did call them Thursday, and she said they wouldn't file it until that day, so it would probably be a few days before I got it. So. Where's Stephanie?
I'm not sure what they're doing this morning. I've talked to her twice actually, but I don't remember. Honestly, it kind of sounded like she said she was taking Taylor to her job, but maybe I misunderstood.
Did Taylor get a job?
If she did, she just got it yesterday afternoon. But she was in a place where her phone was going in and out, and I wasn't real sure exactly what she said, so I'm not sure.
Did you stay last night?
No, Bonnie didn't. Yeah. No, I was just up there. I got to be there yesterday morning for Taylor's visit with Damien. So, he is so precious. And I got to hold him and it was good.
Yeah, we had lunch yesterday with Dale's brother and his wife, and their other son died about 5 years ago with cystic fibrosis. He was like 35, I think. And so we hadn't got to visit with them. So Linda made fried chicken and mashed potatoes. But we sat out in the wind on their porch, and all of us were just tired last night. Dale and I barely even did a feed run.
Were you tired from like working in the morning, or do you think you were tired
No,
from just?
because we went to Brownwood because he had to pick up some feeders and a new garbage disposal because his is leaking at the house, and so we didn't really feed much yesterday because he was still asleep when I left this morning. So he must have really been tired. Me and Jay were up, but he wasn't. So.
Yeah.
And I was telling Ross I was just being lazy this morning. I didn't want to get out of bed. She went back to sleep except for her cats.
Oh, her cat's
Parkouring all half the night and even this morning. It's like, that's why I don't do cats.
I used to. But I don't anymore.
She's
You used to
becoming crazy
parkour all
cat.
night?
It's still got a huge white spot. No, I used to do cats, but I do not do cats anymore. Isn't that what you said? You said that.
I don't do cats.
Yeah.
My daughter didn't used to either, but she's become a crazy
Yeah,
cat.
she
lady.
has.
Mhm.
Well, I was. How many cats did I have? 7?
5.5.
Okay.
5.5.
Well, one came with the house. It was an indoor-outdoor cat.
So it's a half a cat.
Of course, we
Yeah.
took it with us when we moved.
That's how many cats I had inside a small house. And then I had Joshua. And then I was like, oh yeah, I don't care about my cats anymore. Yeah. Well, and then we moved. We lived.
Good
I had
news,
him
I'm sure you're
promised
worth
a
6
year,
cats.
Right.
and we moved. And we moved out in the middle of nowhere, out at Nemo. And I was like, all right, you're all outdoor cats now. And of course, that didn't take long before they were like,
Yeah.
they slowly. But I had one cat. Was she 18?
21. That's what I'm
Ringo was
thinking.
21, really? Anyway, I had this cat named Ringo. And she lived,
Okay.
she curled up in her cat bed and died.
So Dale had, Lucy was 22, and we just put her down like a month or so ago.
Oh gosh, was that hard on him?
No. Or at least he doesn't act like it. It was actually Phoenicia's cat that he inherited. We had
So that's
a
not
barn
super
cat that
unheard of.
was 25 years old that he ran over in the Ranger, and he had to shoot it while I was in there with him.
Well, I guess it's officially time to get things rolling. So,
You're been movers.
thanks. I want to say thank you for joining us, especially those whom I can't see. Wave hi. And just want to say thanks for coming. I want to let you guys know some things that are going on. We have, first of all, we have a men's and a women's recovery group going every week. The women meet Mondays at 7. It's at the Reunion Center, which is a block south of the Comanche County Courthouse. Again, that's Monday at 7. Men are 7:30 on Tuesday. Okay? Same place, almost same time. We're just a half hour later because men are a little more chill, right? Is that it?
No.
No? Okay.
Because we're taking it.
Maybe it's because I'm a little more chill. There you go.
Yeah.
But anyway, I want to go ahead and encourage you, if you're suffering with alcohol addiction or drug addiction or porn addiction or sex addiction or food addiction, whatever it is you're dealing with, come get involved with a group that will absolutely look out for you and help you through this and get some real freedom and peace. And so I just want to encourage you to go ahead and dig into those groups. Also just want to say, as far as Live Oak Church goes, that we are probably going to be doing some major changes here in the near future. And we're asking you guys to pray about that. We're talking about going into town, renting, or who knows, maybe God does a miracle, even buying a place, who knows. But at any rate, meeting someplace a little more public, I guess, so to speak. So at any rate, we want you guys to be in prayer about that. And so that's going to take a major step up on all of our parts in a lot of areas. And so it's something that's, quite honestly, I look at it and I'm like, I don't think we can do this. But again, one of our core values is that faith means risk. And we got to be willing to step out in faith and do things that are beyond what we are capable of so that we can see God glorified. So, at any rate, that is our plan. And so we're going to go ahead and just ask you guys to be in prayer about that. And we will start making some plans probably here in the near future. But at any rate,
We have Embrace Grace classes this
oh
Thursday,
yes,
4 o'clock.
thank you. Embrace Grace class, 4 o'clock. This is for any single young mothers who just are scared, are struggling, don't have a good support structure. Whatever the problem is that you're dealing with, if you're pregnant, or if you got a young child, come on out. And that's going to be at 4 o'clock here at Live Oak, which is 1551 County Road, 416 here in Comanche. So, at any rate, if that meets your need, then we just want to ask you to go ahead and come on out. And Tanya will be leading that, and it's a good thing. So, at any rate, I guess I'll step out of the way and we'll go ahead and start some worship. So, let's do this. All right. Let's start off with Fierce. Every to cry, that's fine.
Absolutely.
So-
I was gonna say, I can read it if you
No,
need.
no, no, please do not. So, we're glad to have both of you. So, all right, let's sing my victory. So grateful for that, and that's just the gospel. I mean, that's the beautiful part about it, is that the moment that it looked like God had been defeated, when he'd been killed by his greatest adversary, he was in perfect control. It was his plan all along, and he turned it all around for his victory, which translates into our victory. You guys can take a seat. Singing is thirsty work. Well, I want to say thanks again for coming. Glad to have you guys here. Glad to have whoever's online checking us out, and hope you find God's presence is powerful there in your home or wherever it is you're watching, as I found him to be here. And I'm just humbled, honestly, by the fact of what Jesus did. And I know that sounds corny, and I'm sorry for that, because I don't want it to sound corny, I don't want it to sound trite. But the fact that God Almighty, the maker of the universe, the one who keeps everything held together, without whom my cells wouldn't hold together, heck, the molecules that make my cells wouldn't hold together, that God cared enough about me to come down and die on the cross for me. And he loves you enough for that as well. And that is a love that I don't think I'm ever really going to fully understand. But as I've said before, and I will say again, I look forward to spending the rest of eternity learning how to understand that love. So, at any rate, we are going through a series basically on ordinary faith in extraordinary times. And it's been going through on the book of Daniel. And it's just an amazing book that, I'm going to level with you. This has been a struggle for me to go through. It's a lot different. It's very different to go through the book of Daniel than it is to go through the book of Acts like we have before, or other books in the New Testament. It's just a whole different ballpark. And that's good for me, because it causes me to stretch and grow in ways that I wouldn't choose to do on my own, which, that's generally the way I grow, if we're being honest. So, just want to look through this and take a hard look at what it looks like to have a real faith that works in any circumstance. Because, it's a cakewalk to be a Christian Sunday morning. Most people who have attended church in their life have zero problem with that. An hour to maybe 3 on Sunday mornings, and you're good. I can be good for 3 hours, usually. But the question is, what happens Monday morning when it's just the daily drudgery of going on with life, when we're dreading to go into work in the morning? Much less what it's like when life gets genuinely hard. Kind of stuff that if you tell people about what's going on, they're going to almost take a step back. It's so mind-boggling to know what people deal with sometimes. And that's the sort of thing Daniel's gone through. He was born in his hometown, wherever that was, I assume Jerusalem, but somewhere in the kingdom of Judah, and raised up to be a young man. So in Jewish context, that could be like 12. Now, my 11-year-old, I don't think, is emotionally equipped to see his hometown sacked by an invading army and then carted off to, hundreds of miles away, to live and serve a king who sacked your city. I don't know that I'm emotionally equipped for that. Let's just be honest. But Daniel's a young man. That's all we really know about him. So that could be 12, that could be early 20s maybe, I don't know. But regardless, it's extraordinary circumstances. And though I don't think any of us have been captured in that sense, we all have, well, most of us anyway, have gone through some set of circumstances that have been extraordinary. The kind of thing that really just makes people, if they really know what's going on, they're glad they're not going through it too. And so this is the sort of thing Daniel's going through. If you guys remember in chapter 1, we see that little incident with him and his 3 friends, and these guys don't want to eat the things that the king offered them. The king's saying, okay, these guys are going to be trained, they're going to be administrators in my kingdom. These are the best of the best. I want them to eat good food so they can eat the same stuff that I'm eating. All right, that sounds like a good deal. The problem was that not all of it was according to the kosher diet that they followed. And so Daniel and his 3 friends basically said, no, we can't eat that. And the inherent problem with that is that anytime you tell a king no, there's risk involved. And so these guys took their lives in their hands over a diet. Why? Because they wanted to set themselves apart to God. They wanted to be completely different from the rest of the people in Babylon. Not so much so that they would poke out from the people of Babylon, but so that they would be close to God. Because that's the whole point of this thing, is you're not setting yourself so much apart from the world. You're setting yourself apart to God. That's the point. And so Daniel and his friends do that, and God blesses them. They go through a 10-day experiment where they just eat vegetarian diet. Actually, I guess it would probably even be vegan diet by today's standards, just vegetables and water. And yet still they manage to thrive under that diet, whereas everyone else is having whatever it is the king likes to eat. And so they go through that, and they benefit from that. And then when the king finally interviews them after they graduated from his little graduate school of Babylonian leadership, he finds them to be 10 times more capable than anyone else. And it's not because they're super great people. It's because they'd set themselves apart to be with God. The wisdom that they had was not their own. It was a divine wisdom, a gift from God. And if you guys remember in the book of James, which we just went through last, divine wisdom is there. All we got to do is ask for it. And so Daniel and his friends did. And so the next thing that goes on is that the king has this funky dream. It just totally freaks him out. And he says, I want you guys to make sure that you guys can tell me what this dream means. I want you to tell me what the dream was. So I'm not going to tell you what the dream was. You're going to tell me what my dream was, and therefore what it means. And of course, none of his wise people, except for Daniel, could. And so Daniel and his friends prayed. God gave them the dream, the interpretation, and Daniel came up to the king and said, okay, here's what your dream means. And it was a dream about the future, about kingdoms and empires, about the Babylonian Empire, yes, but all the way through the Roman Empire, and arguably even into today. But regardless, they've been going through these trials, and they're not done yet. Nebuchadnezzar is an odd individual, I think. I think he's smart enough to know that I need to get the best of the people that I conquer and incorporate them into my kingdom, so my kingdom will be stronger for it. So he's smart in that way. And when he's talking with Daniel and his friends, he sees their divine wisdom, and he sees that they're having more, they're able to handle responsibility better than anyone else. And you know that they're giving credit where it's due. They're not saying, oh yeah, I'm this great administrator because you trained me, king. They're not saying anything like that. They're saying, look, this is God. What you're seeing in us that you find so amazing, that's the God of heaven and earth. And so they go through that. Nebuchadnezzar has his dream. Of course, once he hears the interpretation, he's blown away. And I'm going to back up just a little bit into chapter 2, and I'm going to read what it is that Nebuchadnezzar's reaction was. says, the king says to Daniel, truly your God is the greatest of gods, the Lord over kings, the revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this secret. So, Nebuchadnezzar recognizes God. But so what? Because nothing changes in Nebuchadnezzar. And I'm just here to tell you that people, this happens honestly all the time in the United States. I suspect most people who go to church would be in the boat that Nebuchadnezzar's in. That they look at God, they say, oh wow, God, you blew my mind out of the water right there. You're amazing. And that's where it ends. They know that there's a God. They're amazed by him in some capacity. Maybe they even decide to try to follow him to some extent. But there's no change. There's nothing says that they're really serious about getting to know this God of Daniel and his friends. And that's Nebuchadnezzar. And that's a lot of people here in the U.S. I can only assume it's that way to some extent, the rest of the world, but I haven't been very many places, so I can't say. But regardless, this brings us to chapter 3, which is what we're looking at now. And this is a classic. If you've been in church as a kid, very often the odds are good you heard the story. It's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, tale of the fiery furnace. And this is something that, I heard about so many times as a kid, and so has anyone else who's grown up in church, that it's kind of hard to escape that Sunday school mentality. And hopefully we'll do a good job of that today, because the worst thing to do with the Bible is to come out of passage saying, oh yeah, I know this, and you just kind of go through it. And you take it for granted, and you're like, I know this material, I really don't need to pay attention. So you shift your brain into neutral, and you just cruise through. And that's a tragedy, because every single time we can get something out of God's Word. He's been amazing with that. I've read some books of the Bible dozens of times. Like 1 John is one of my favorites, maybe even arguably my favorite. And I kid you not, I probably read that book at least 50 times. I still get stuff out of it. And that's the way God works. The Bible's an onion. You peel back layers, and there's amazing stuff beneath what you were looking at last time. So, at any rate, God does that. And I don't want this to be just a routine thing. So we're going to try. We'll see if we succeed. You can tell me if I succeeded or not. But at any rate, the thing I really wanted to emphasize from what we looked at last week was in Nebuchadnezzar. Because what Nebuchadnezzar did with his whole dream thing and his whole overreaction was that he was looking, he'd been touched by God. The spiritual world, so to speak, had touched his life through a dream. And he needed an answer. And so what did he do? He went to his astrologers who look at the stars and the moon and the planets and other things in order to figure out what it is happening in life. They couldn't give the answer. He went to his magicians who use heaven knows what in order to try to be able to accomplish things in the real world. They didn't have any answers. All of his advisors, with their earthly wisdom, couldn't figure this out. It literally took divine intervention. It took God going and telling Daniel what the dream was and what it meant. So Nebuchadnezzar was looking in the physical world for answers to spiritual problems. This is something we do a lot. I mean, it's our default. We have to fight against that. And Nebuchadnezzar is no different than you or I in that capacity. And so that is kind of where we left off with him, is that he acknowledged God, but he's seen a glimpse of the spiritual world. He's been touched by God in a very real way, but it still hasn't changed him. He has not given his life to God. And so, let's see what he goes on and does. We don't know how much time passes between chapter 2 and chapter 3. This could be next week. This could be 20 years from then. We just don't know. But Nebuchadnezzar said, it says, I'll just go ahead and start reading. In chapter 3, verse 1, it says, King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then he sent messages to the high officers, officials, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the provincial officials to come to the dedication of the statue he had set up. So, all these officials came and stood before the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald shouted and said, People of all races and nations and languages, listen to the king's command. When you hear the sound of the horn, flute, the rest of the orchestra, I'll skip a little bit here, and other musical instruments, bow to the ground and worship King Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue. Anyone who refuses to obey will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. So, at the sound of the musical instruments, all the people, whatever their race, nation, or language, bowed to the ground and worshiped the gold statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So, Nebuchadnezzar, in a show of wealth, because let's face it, a golden statue, even if that thing's hollow, 19 by 9 foot gold statue, that's some serious gold. So he's showing off his wealth. But that's not all he's trying to do. He's trying to, again, because he's a king, he's a conqueror, he's trying to control things, which is something else we do pretty often when you think about it. He's trying to control these people's spiritual life. Like the God of heaven had not touched his life a little while ago. Like I said, maybe that was 20 years before, I don't know. But God had touched his life, and he had been amazed by it. And he still sets up this other thing to be worshipped. It wasn't just a matter of, hey, this is a pretty cool statue. Come see this artwork I've set up. No, he wanted people to worship. And matter of fact, in chapter 2, if you guys remember, verse 46 talks about King Nebuchadnezzar threw himself down before Daniel and worshipped him. This is the same word. So what Nebuchadnezzar did before Daniel, he's asking people to do before this gold statue. Nebuchadnezzar, at his heart, has the same thing, same issue that we all have. A worship issue. Who or what are we worshiping? Ideally, it's supposed to be God. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's what we were made to do. We were made to be in fellowship with him. We were made to be amazed by the infinite creator of the universe. But we're screwed up. And so we put other things. We put other people in that position. Some people, anything or anyone that your life rises or falls upon, you have an idol in your life. You are worshiping something other than God. So, if your mood completely is altered by someone else's mood change, I'm not talking about just the fact, I'm not talking about, just, it can't help but rub a little bit off on you. I'm talking about, when you start bending over backwards to accommodate someone's bad mood, try to get them back in a good mood. You're going to whatever length it is. When your life rises or falls on that person's mood, you have made that person a god in your life. And in case you haven't noticed, people can't be pleased. Because they'll want one thing one moment, and then they'll want the exact opposite the next. I've done it. I promise you've done it. We all do it. Nebuchadnezzar, he's the same way. He has this worship issue. He doesn't yet really get it. There's no God but God alone. There's the only one that's worth worshiping. There's only one whom we can be satisfied in and in turn satisfy him. And so Nebuchadnezzar sets up this gold statue. And he requires everybody. And this isn't just like, hey, I strongly suggest that you bow down and worship this idol. No, this is, if you don't, you're dead. So that's where we are. His focus is still on the physical instead of the spiritual. Let's plunge on. It says, but some of the astrologers went to the king and informed on the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, long live the king! You issued a decree requiring all the people to bow down and worship the gold statue when they heard the sound of the musical instruments. That decree also states that those who refuse to obey must be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whom you have put in charge of the province of Babylon. They pay no attention to you, your majesty. They refuse to serve your gods and do not worship the gold statue you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage and ordered that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought before him. When they were brought in, Nebuchadnezzar said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you refuse to serve my gods or to worship the gold statue I have set up? I will give you one more chance to bow down and worship the statue I have made. But when you hear the sound of musical instruments, but if you refuse, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my power? And I just got to pause right there because I notice Nebuchadnezzar talking here, and he's talking about this idol, but there's a whole lot of I, me, my power. I'm starting to think, it makes me honestly wonder if this gold statue wasn't a representation of him. It might have been made to physically look like him. It might not. There's nothing in the Bible that tells us one way or the other. So don't take this as law. But I can tell you that I see things in what he's saying that whether it looks like him or not, in his mind, it is him. That's ego. Wow. So here's their response. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up. That's a bold statement. Because these guys know it's not just their lives are in danger. Their lives are pretty much forfeit right now. They know it. And this king holds their life and death in their hands. They've served him well. They've served him faithfully. They impressed him however long ago it was that they graduated. Remember, 10 times better than all his other officials? He knew the value of these guys. But his ego was so outrageously in control of his life that it didn't matter. That he was willing to kill so that people would honor him above any other. That's a problem. And they stood their ground without any promise from God for safety. Now, if I were to say, there's one thing I hear people pray for more than any other thing, it's safety. I hear that a lot. God, give us, we have a Christian term we use to ask God to keep us safe on a trip. God, give us traveling mercies. And to be honest, that phrase has always irritated me. But regardless, it's something we have set up. I think it's something of an idol here in the American mindset, this idea of safety, that it is something we have to pray for all the time. I got bigger fish to fry. There's things more important than my safety and my kids' safety. Not saying I never do ask for God's protection, but I don't make it a priority. I recognize that following Jesus is not a safe thing. It's not. And it's not going to change just because I asked for it. So, at any rate, they have the courage to stand up to Nebuchadnezzar to his face, and they're respectful about it. But they tell him boldly and simply, we will not bow to any god you set up. We will not bow to any god but God alone. So, here's Nebuchadnezzar's reaction. Verse 19, Nebuchadnezzar was so furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that his face became distorted with rage. He commanded that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual. Then he ordered some of the strongest men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the furnace. So they tied them up and threw them into the furnace, fully dressed in their pants, turbans, robes, and other garments. And because the king, in his anger, had demanded such a hot fire in the furnace, the flames killed the soldiers as they threw the 3 men in. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, securely tied, fell into the roaring flames. So, guys, this is what I really want you guys to get from this. When the spiritual world touches our lives and we are focused on the purely physical nature of what's going on in the physical world, we lose control and we lose our tempers. That's what Nebuchadnezzar did. He felt like he had lost control. That these 3 people who he had trusted with his home, effectively, his home province of Babylon, these guys are like the highest officials over administrating his hometown. These guys should be appreciative of his benevolence, of his, well, they should basically bow and worship him. It's basically what he felt. And he just totally lost it. He lost his temper. It wasn't enough just to kill these guys. It wasn't enough to burn them alive. No, let's build the fire way hotter than it's ever been. So hot that the people who threw them in didn't go into the fire, but they actually died from the heat. That's a hot furnace. So, at any rate, verse 24. But suddenly, Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in amazement and exclaimed to his advisors, "Didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them into the furnace?" "Yes, your majesty, we certainly did," they replied. "Look," Nebuchadnezzar shouted, "I see 4 men, unbound, walking around in the fire unharmed, and the 4th looks like a god." Then Nebuchadnezzar came as close as he could to the door of the flaming furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stepped out of the fire. Then the high officers, officials, governors, advisors crowded around them and saw that the fire had not touched them. Not a hair on their heads was singed, and their clothing was not scorched. They didn't even smell of smoke. That's detail. These guys have been miraculously delivered from even having to wash their laundry. It's a miracle in every sense of the term. Those guys had no right to be alive. And I just love that part. It's right out in Nebuchadnezzar's mouth. The 4th is like a god. Theologians like to argue about stuff like this. This might have been an angel. This might have been Jesus himself before he came down to be born. We don't know. But regardless, he was obviously different from anyone else. Just imagine looking into the fire and you're seeing 4 people, and by virtue of where they are, they're well lit. And yet, 4th guy stands out in a very obvious way. I mean, that really makes me wonder exactly what was going on physically with this guy that stood out so much. Maybe I'll never know, but I suspect that's one of those questions God will answer. That's the easier ones. But man, it's amazing. And here is his reaction in verse 28. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted him. They defied the king's command and were willing to die rather than serve or worship any god except their own God." So right here, Nebuchadnezzar's, you know what? He's in the same place he was at the end of chapter 2. He's blown away by God. And God has come through in a miraculous way. I mean, it's crazy to think that God would tell somebody what my dream was and what it meant. You stop and think about it. It's mind-reading territory. And then, however much later it is, we see 3 people miraculously delivered from death. A gruesome death. And still, they're fine. Nebuchadnezzar does the same thing that he did after the last time. He turns around and praises God. I mean, how can you not do that? Praise the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue the servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's command and were willing to die rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. So, he stops and he acknowledges God. But he goes on. He doesn't just stop there, but he takes things a little bit further. "Therefore I make this decree. If any people, whatever their race or nation or language, speak a word against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they will be torn limb from limb, and their houses will be turned into heaps of rubble. There is no God who can rescue like this." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to even higher positions within the province of Babylon. So, these guys are saved by God. And the king recognizes divine intervention when he sees it. And so he goes ahead and says, "Okay, let's praise to God, and I'm even going to make this rule. No one can smack talk about God. Nothing like that. Matter of fact, if you do, I'm going to make sure you're toast and your house is torn down." I mean, he's serious about this, right? Yes, but no. We can see that Nebuchadnezzar's a guy who's kind of, let's just say he's a little emotional and he kind of goes to extremes. But he's still, even though he's praising God, even though he's amazed by God's power and his presence in these 3 men's life, he's still unchanged. That's the problem. 2 times now, Nebuchadnezzar's life had been touched by a divine miracle. Kind of stuff that I'd almost be willing to kill in order to be able to witness. And Nebuchadnezzar just says, "You go, God," and then carries on with his business. Was Nebuchadnezzar humbled? No. No, we're going to take a look at what God does to Nebuchadnezzar next week to bring him to a place of humility. But Nebuchadnezzar just didn't get it. And I hate to say it, but this is the story of countless people who are inside the church, who've grown up in church, who have lived in church, and who have died in church. Going to church does not make you a Christian. It doesn't. I've heard it said that going to church makes you a Christian as much as sitting in a garage makes you a car. It really is that big of a difference. You can't, going to a place does not make you something. It doesn't change who you are. If I go to Paris, I'm not French. It's the same thing with the church. We can't just be amazed. We can sing praise songs all day long, and we can mean every word of it. But if it's still, if we have failed to surrender our lives to God, if we have failed to humble ourselves, and that is, I think, what Nebuchadnezzar's core problem is, that he's unable at this point in his life, despite being amazed by God, he's unable to humble himself, get his ego out of the way, and humbly admit, God is way bigger than I am. God is able to save. And God can. He does all the time. It may not be quite as dramatic as a furnace and 3 or 4 men being in there, but it's still. You guys could probably stop and think about somebody you know, maybe it's you, who's had such a dramatic life change that it's night and day difference. This is an entirely different person. They're just using the same name and face. And that's what God does. That is what God does. He changes our lives. We just have to get ourselves down on our knees. We have to humble ourselves. Physically, okay, if you need to get down on your knees and pray, then do it, But whatever it is, spiritually speaking, you need to be able to get your ego out of the picture. And you need to be able to admit your need for God. Nebuchadnezzar can't do that. Not yet. Frankly, I don't know if he really ever does it. But we're going to see his ego get out of the way, so he'll be a step closer. But we still need to surrender. We still need to give our lives to Jesus. So, that's the key. And here's what I want you guys really to remember. This whole series of ordinary faith in extraordinary times. Here's what I want you guys to take away. In extraordinary times, ordinary faith doesn't settle for anything less than God. That's what we're tempted to do every single day. For an alcoholic, they settle for less than God with a beer or whiskey or whatever.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, I said that we all settle for less than God. And so for an alcoholic, that means they're settling for a beer or for whiskey or whatever it is. For an addict, it could be heroin or cocaine or any number of things. But for most people, we settle for people. We settle for things, maybe a new car, maybe a new house, maybe a delicious dessert. Might be that blizzard you're living for on Friday. But whatever it is, we look for things to fill that void other than God. And this is where our challenge comes in. We need to be willing to not settle for anything less than God in our lives. And so when you find yourself going looking for something else, just stop and ask yourself why it is you're looking for something or someone else. And then if the answer is ultimately, I'm looking for something to fill the place of God, well then stop yourself and go to the real source. So, Nebuchadnezzar, even though he's been touched by God, he's still in the same boat. He's had 2 experiences with God. 2 highly emotional reaction, and 0 change. That's a problem. A real faith brings change. When we experience God, are we changing? Because it happens in the Christian as well as it does to the non-Christian who becomes a Christian. We should be changing all the time. When we experience God, we should absolutely walk away changed. And basically it comes down, do we come to God and we tell him, I trust you. I trust you more than I trust my husband, my wife, my kids, my parents, my siblings, my friends. I trust you more than drugs or alcohol or anything else we choose. We need to trust him. We need to not settle for less than God himself. So, let's go ahead and pray. Lord God, I want to say thank you so much. Thank you for Jesus, because what he did on the cross made it to where we could not settle for less than you. I thank you for touching my life. Thank you for helping me to get my ego out of the way and just surrender my life to you. God, I'm yours. Help me to walk away changed every time I meet with you. Help me to meet with you every single day. God, help me to show the love that you have for others to other people, so that every single interaction people have with me, they can come away saying there was something different. He didn't just ask how I was doing because that's a way of saying hi in America. He really wanted to know how I was doing. God, I thank you so much for your grace, and you know how much I still let you down. It bothers me. But you're still here, you're still forgiving me, and you're still strengthening me to get up and do it again and do it right this time. God, I don't want to settle for less, because anything else isn't even a distant second. It's so far down. You are so much better. You are so much better than anything else this world has to offer us. People, places, things, whatever. You're better. Father, thank you so much for this time together. And I just ask that you would work in our lives this week. Thank you so much. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I don't say this very often, but I do want to say that if you guys have any questions, or you guys just need to talk about whatever, you can talk to Tanya, you can talk to me. For people on Facebook or YouTube, you guys can message us, and you can contact us with us that way, and we would be happy to start whatever conversation it is that you need to have. So with that, I'm going to say that's it. I love you guys, and I'll see you next time.